a friend of mine now. I would say that Dr. Nick Tu, it's a special privilege for me, Dr. Tu, to introduce you this afternoon. As most of you know, the largest commercial oil sands operation is ongoing in the Canadian province of Alberta. You've heard that several times this morning. In December of 2012, I had the pleasure of participating in a Southern States Energy Board trip to Alberta, hosted by the government of Alberta. And they thought we were pretty serious in that we came when it was 40 below zero. And we were serious because it has been significant to our region. The Energy Board members, 8 of us, and geologists from Edmonton and Fort McMurray joined in this fact-finding mission to better understand the oil sands resources that Alberta has to offer to this nation. It also was a great opportunity to learn about the technologies utilized to extract the resources, and also to get a better understanding of our environmental concerns, our regulatory and permitting processes, and the economic impact of developing these resources. And ladies and gentlemen, they are very important to our region. On July the 27th, 2013, Governor Bentley and the Mississippi Governor Phil Bryant jointly signed a memorandum of understanding recognizing that a partnership between the states, the energy industry, and major utilities would create a positive impact on the successful evaluation of the potential exploration and development of these resources. Since the signing of the MOU, Dr. Nick Tu has led the project for the state of Alabama. And let me say this, and your state is no different than these 2 states that have partnered together. There is no state line out there that you can find in the woods. Okay, you may find a sign or 2 on the interstate, but that geology does not do that. And so, worst thing that we are doing as states to our business and industry, one state's regulations look like this, the next state over looks like that, one state looks like this, and it's just impossible. First thing that we tried to do was take Alabama and Mississippi's regulatories and put those together so that it was seamless, so that a company looking to come to our region could come in here and not have to jump through so many different permits, which were basically the same thing. Dr. Tu has led that charge and brought those issues to the legislature, and we have passed them and put them into code. Dr. Tu is our state geologist and oil and gas supervisor. In these positions, he directs the Geological Survey of Alabama and the staff of the State Oil and Gas Board. Dr. Tu also served as an adjunct professor in the Department of Geological Sciences at the University of Alabama. He holds a bachelor's, master's, and PhD degrees in geology. Dr. Tu has extensive knowledge of Alabama's surface and subsurface geology and the state's richest endowment of geological related natural resources. He has published extensively and is an expert in petroleum geology. I would also say that Dr. Tu is leading a major player in the BP oil settlement. He is one of 3 trustees from the state of Alabama, and he offers unique insight into those debates. And I feel comfortable knowing that he is representing not only Alabama, but he's also representing the southern states in this particular situation. Please join me and let's welcome, you're going to enjoy this presentation, a great guy, a great friend, Dr. Nick Tu.
Well, thank you, Representative Davis, for that generous introduction there. I will say this, that we're lucky to have some legislators in Montgomery that are very, very interested in these energy issues, and Representative Davis is one of those, and he's a huge supporter of my 2 agencies, along with Representative Mickey Hammond, who's in the back of the room back there. And I really appreciate what they do, and Senator Cam Ward and others, Senator Sandiford. they're good allies and good friends for us in the legislature down there, and it means a lot to have that kind of support. As Randy said, we went to Alberta, northern Alberta, in December, and those people looked at us a little funny when we got off of that airplane that morning. It was more than 20 degrees below zero. And here are all these Alabamians and Mississippians looking out like Eskimos coming off of that airplane. They're saying, what are these crazy people doing here in December? But it was a really, really good trip, and we learned an awful lot, and we very much appreciate our friends from the government of Alberta and the Canadian government for the insights that they've given us into oil sands development, and the things that we can learn from them are so important as we move down this road. And they have been most generous with their time, and we've had briefings from various groups up there. We have a really robust understanding now, but we have an opportunity to learn even more, so we want to go back and do that. So we really appreciate that. Also want to recognize Denise Hills, who is here, right on the second row here. Denise is the head of the Energy Investigations Program at the Geological Survey of Alabama. And on the ground, she's spearheading the effort that I'm going to describe to you today in terms of oil sands in Alabama. So, Denise, thank you for your work and the work of your group, very important to us. So what I want to do, and if I can find I hope this advances the slides. What I want to do to you today is talk about Alabama's oil sands and a little bit about Mississippi, and talk about the efforts that we have underway in terms of research to understand our oil sand resources better, and how we're going to approach the regulatory process for the oil sands. So what you have there is a map of the geology of Alabama. And for those non-geologists in the room, which I assume would be most of you, every color on that map is a rock unit that we can map at the surface. And of course, every one of those rock units continues into the subsurface. So you can see that Alabama is a very geologically complex state, very diverse in our geology, both in the types of rocks that we have and the ages of the various rock units in the state. And because of that geological diversity, we also have a great diversity in our fossil fuel energy resource endowment. Of course, we have coal. We've heard a lot about our coal this morning. Patrick gave a very good talk about the coal industry in the state of Alabama. We have both conventional and unconventional oil and natural gas resources. And what we're going to talk about today is one of those unconventional resources that has potential, has not been tapped at this time, but has potential in North Alabama, our Alabama oil sands. So what are oil sands? Oil sands, in a general way, are rocks that contain bitumen. And typically these rocks are sandstones, but they can be limestone. Some limestones are impregnated with bitumen as well. And this bitumen is a sticky, black, highly viscous material that won't flow at normal temperatures. It takes some heat or some sort of solvent to actually move the bitumen in a liquid form. So it's a viscous, liquid to semi-solid, low-grade oil. So it's a heavy oil is actually what it is. It's too thick to flow or be pumped without being heated or treated or diluted or somehow make it amenable to movement. So oil sands in the U.S., we've heard a little bit about that earlier today. The three major states with oil sands in the U.S. are Utah, Alaska, and Alabama in that order. But there are some oil sands in 11 states in the U.S. Those being Alabama, Alaska, California, Kansas, Kentucky, Missouri, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Texas, Utah, and Wyoming. But Alabama is blessed with having an endowment that's number 3 in the nation. So we have a significant resource that we're looking at in the North Alabama area. Our resource may also extend into Mississippi, both the surface expression in the outcrop and in the subsurface as you move to depth. The same rock unit continues into Mississippi, so we're looking at Mississippi as well, or we're working with Mississippi as well. Utah has just started developing their oil sands out there. I think the first permit has now been issued after a lengthy delay, and I think they're proceeding ahead with the development of the oil sand resources in Utah, and we plan to visit out there as well and see what they're doing and how they're doing things so that we can better understand that. So Alabama's oil sands, there's a big map of the state there with an inset of the northwestern or the northern part of the state, kind of catty-cornered over to the northwest. So hopefully this will work. At the surface expression of this rock unit called the Hartselle sandstone is shown here in green, and then in brown is the subsurface expression of this rock unit. So you can see that even though the surface expression is about 70 miles or so across there, and about 5 miles wide, the subsurface expression is much greater than that. So the total, we have about 2,500 square miles that has Hartselle sandstone that's known to contain varying amounts of oil sand. To date, we've had no, as I said, we have had no commercial exploitation of these resources for the purpose of extracting oil. We've had some other operations for asphalt and other things over the years, but there has not been, to date, the exact balance of economics and technology to allow this to be a commercial venture. But those two are trying to converge a little bit, the technology and the economics. Oil prices have been at a high level, as all of you know, for a quite extended period of time now. So it's generated a lot of new interest in the Alabama area for the oil sands. So we've been known about this for a long, long time. The Geological Survey had publications that made mention of the oil sands back in the late 1800s. We had a publication directly related to the asphalt deposits of North Alabama in 1925. All of this has been studied by geologists over the years. We've known it's there. As I said, there was some commercial exploitation of this back at around the turn of the century, a little later than that. Some roads in North Alabama were actually paved with materials from the Hartselle oil sands. So the resource has been utilized. It's just never been utilized to produce crude oil or to extract bitumen for the process of upgrading to crude oil. The last major study that was done was in 1985, and that was a report of the Geological Survey of Alabama, Bulletin 111 of the Geological Survey by Gary Wilson, a very competent and expert geologist at the Geological Survey and the State Oil and Gas Board at that time. Gary did some excellent work with the data that he had, but at that time the data was rather limited. So I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing to fill in some of those data gaps and gain some more data to do the work that we're going to do. Just so you can see, here's a surface expression of the Hartselle sandstone, and you can see the bitumen actually oozing out of the rocks. And there's times it gets a little hot in Alabama in the summertime, for those of you that have been here. So it actually will ooze from the rock formation at some places if it has certain characteristics during the hotter days of the summer. So here are some statistics, if you will, or some characteristics of the oil sands and the saturations and those sorts of things from Gary Wilson's work in 1985. Again, an excellent piece of work, a quality piece of work, and it gives us a springboard from which we can launch to do the work that we're going to be doing over the next several years relative to characterizing and assessing the oil sand resources of Alabama. But the saturations are highly variable. It can be anywhere from a trace to up to over 700 barrels per acre foot in these rocks. So some of these rocks are all impregnated, almost all the porosity is filled with bitumen in some of these rocks, and others have just a little bit. Porosities range from 5% up to 24%. 24% porosity in a rock is a rock with a lot of porosity. It can hold a lot of oil. So when we get those high porosities, we're looking at rocks that could be very rich and could yield quite a bit of oil when they're processed. Permeabilities, this is the ability that measures the ability of fluids to flow through the rock from less than 10 millidarcies, which is not a lot, up to 100 plus millidarcies. So some very permeable rocks in some situations here. Gary put all of this information and all of the data that he had together in 1985, and he had some estimates of what might be out there. His estimate of total oil in place in the Hartselle Sandstone primarily was 7.5 billion barrels. So a very significant resource that's out there. He estimated that about 350 million barrels of that was within 50 feet of the surface. So if we talk about surface mining, that 350 million barrels or whatever we come up with when we're done with our assessment would be the target for that surface mining part of the operation. But the real prize is in the subsurface, which would be developed by some sort of wellbore technology using steam or solvents or other methodologies to make the bitumen flow to the wellbore and be able to be produced. So that's what we're looking at. I've shown you a model there of how the Hartselle Sandstone was deposited. It basically was a beach barrier system, like we might see if we went down to Gulf Shores or Orange Beach right now, or over to Dolphin Island. So really clean sandstones being deposited in a beach environment. So these sandstones don't have a lot of other rock or mineral constituents in there. It's mostly sand, and that's why we get these good porosities and permeabilities. But knowing a depositional model for us geologists is very, very important, because then we can make predictions about where the good rock bodies might be based on what we know about that depositional system and how various tracks or systems tracks might be laid out within that depositional system. So you'd be looking for the Dolphin Island rather than the marsh over in Grand Bay and that area behind it. You're wanting that good clean sandstone. So that's why we're very keen on depositional models. There are some differences between the Canadian oil sands and the Alabama oil sands, Alabama-Mississippi oil sands, if you will. There's a difference in geologic age, which won't mean much to most of you, but the Canadian oil sands are Cretaceous in age, while ours are Mississippian. Ours are much older, and the rocks tend to be much harder, much more indurated. So there's a lot more crushing and those kinds of things that have to go on compared to the Canadian oil sands. Another important difference is the Canadian oil sands are water wet. So there is a water phase around each of the sand grains, and then the oil is between the sand grains outside of that water phase. Ours are oil wet, so we don't have that water phase. So you have to use different technologies would probably be more amenable to extracting the oil from the Alabama oil sands than some of the technologies that have been used in Canada, the Clark process, for example. So we're looking at processes that are more amenable to, one, smaller accumulations that are of a different rock type with a different type of oil-water relationship. So things like a closed loop system of some sort using solvents, and we've been examining some of those technologies, and we've visited with some people that are doing pilot studies with those technologies so we can see what might work for the state of Alabama. We will still take the best lessons learned from our friends in Canada and also our friends in Utah now and see what works best for us down the road to do this in an environmentally friendly way. You heard Governor Bentley say that this morning, that we have to do this, as he has admonished me, if we're going to do it, we have to do it the right way. So as part of the work we're doing, we'll be exploring all of that as well. We mentioned the MOU between Governor Bentley and Governor Bryant, the states of Alabama and Mississippi. This was mentioned this morning. It's been mentioned a couple of times. Representative Davis mentioned this as well. As he said, it was signed at a Southern States Energy Board meeting back in July of 2013, Ken, is that right? That's right. And here you see Governor Bryant, Governor Bentley, there's Representative Hammonds, there's Representative Davis, or Representative Sanderford, Senator Ward, Representative Gary Staples from Mississippi, who was on our little excursion up to Canada. We had a good time up there. And I think Representative McClurkin's there too. So all of those folks were there for the signing of that MOU. And basically what the MOU says is we're going to work together to do assessments and to develop regulations. There's a lot of language in there, but if you boil it all down, it says that we're going to cooperate with each other, and we intend to do that. So the Alabama Oil Sands Program. The oil sands program was announced by Governor Bentley in 2014 in his State of the State address to be housed at the Geological Survey of Alabama and the State Oil and Gas Board of Alabama. Governor Bentley mentioned this morning that he had put money into the budget of the Geological Survey and the State Oil and Gas Board to carry out what he's asked us to do in terms of assessment and regulatory development. And he put that money in his recommended budget to the legislature, and the legislature funded that request, and that actual funding starts day after tomorrow, October 1. So even though we've been doing a lot of groundwork, we've been doing our homework, and I'll mention some of that in a moment, the actual real funding starts on Wednesday, and that's when we'll put boots on the ground and really get started on this. But what the oil sands program is to provide for the state of Alabama, and later working with our friends in Mississippi, a roadmap to facilitate prudent commercial development. Again, looking at it as a prudent way of doing things that's environmentally sound. Assist in the realization of economic and societal benefits from this development. There are benefits to the economy of Alabama. There are benefits to private landowners that have the mineral rights for these resources up there. There are tax benefits to the state of Alabama. And then we've got to do it in an environmentally sound way if we're going to do it, and do it the right way. This program there will provide focus for what we're doing with oil sands in the state of Alabama. Hopefully it will allow us to develop some public-private partnerships, to partner with some of the federal agencies and others like the Southern States Energy Board, who already works with us in partnership on this, so that we can leverage the resources that we have to better understand these resources and then go about developing these resources as time plays out. And then we've got to research and develop the appropriate legal frame and regulatory framework. The regulatory framework is going to be of key importance to move ahead. One, to make sure that we're overseeing things in the right way, and the other is to give industry the certainty they need to make investments in the state of Alabama. So just a little bit about the survey and board. Just some of you may not be familiar with us or what we do. Geological Survey was established in 1848. We're on campus at the University of Alabama in Tuscaloosa. Roll Tide. We do natural resource investigations, characterizations, assessments, and things of that nature ahead of development, essentially. We provide the framework information that allows private sector entities to make decisions about investing in the state of Alabama. So we provide the groundwork for them to get started. And, you know, it's kind of a broad reconnaissance type mission that we have there. So we look at fossil fuel minerals, non-fuel mineral resources, which are extremely important to the state of Alabama, water, and we also do biological resources, primarily looking at water quality issues that are measured by the biota out there in our streams and lakes. In 1944, oil was discovered at Gilbertown up in Choctaw County. So the Geological Survey had done a lot of the early work on oil potential, oil and gas potential for the state of Alabama, and had published on it. And that work, as I just said, was the seed work that went to the discovery of oil at Gilbertown Field. So it was natural that the State Oil and Gas Board and the technical staff of the State Oil and Gas Board evolved more or less out of the Geological Survey. It's a three-member appointed board, appointed by the governor, and then the state geologist, me, serves as staff director to the State Oil and Gas Board staff. Our job is conservation and regulation of the oil and gas resources of the state. Been doing this for a long, long time. I wish Governor Bentley was here. I wanted to show him our first SUV and the horsepower, how much horsepower, or mule power in this case, that SUV had. But here's one of our geologists, or one of our chemists actually, out in the field back in 1902 here in Mobile County, taking measurements of an early gas test well in the state. So we've been doing this for a long time. A lot of service to the state of Alabama. So what are we going to do? This assessment of oil and gas resources that we're going to be involved, or the oil sand resources that we're going to be involved in. Certainly, like any other scientific study, the first thing you determine is what you have. So current data and resources, we're looking at that. That's already underway, has been well underway for a while now. Literature review of everything that we can find about these resources. All of the core material that we already have, and this is our core warehouse in Tuscaloosa. All of these boxes contain rock core. Several of you visited there and you've seen it. So we're looking at all the core materials that we already have in-house that might be able to inform this process of assessment as we move on. And then all the records and everything else that we have, a lot of geophysical well logs from oil and gas test wells that were drilled in that area up there. We have all of that information. So then the second phase, of course, will actually be filling in the gaps. Once we've assessed all the data that we have, we'll go back and look at what data we need and figure out a way to get that data collected, either through new sampling, new drilling, whatever it is that we need to do to fill in those data gaps. We'll do all of these rock mechanics studies, look at all the physical characteristics of the rock and the bitumen, and try to understand extraction technologies that might work for us. So we'll be taking a look at that as well. So talking a little bit about extraction technologies, there are technologies out there that use little or no water, that again are basically closed loop systems that use a solvent of some sort to extract the oil or the bitumen from the sand. And we feel like that these will be better suited for the Alabama rocks. We don't know that for sure yet, but we're kind of using that as a working hypothesis, if you will, that these kinds of systems would work better for the nature of our deposits, the size of our deposits, and also for the environmental footprint that these would allow us to have there. So we're looking at these extraction technologies and actively talking to people that have pilot programs and other things. We had House Bill 503 that was signed into law in May of 2013. That made sure that it was extremely explicit that the State Oil and Gas Board had regulatory authority over oil sands development in the state of Alabama. You might have been able to do a broad reading of our statutory authority as it existed and come to the conclusion that that authority was already under the State Oil and Gas Board. But we thought it was important that it be explicit that it was under the State Oil and Gas Board. So now we're in the process of drafting rules and regulations for mining and extraction of oil sands. Down the road, the drilling of wells, most of that would probably fall under our existing regulatory framework for wells anyway. But we're well down the road to doing some due diligence and homework on the regulatory drafting part of this. So we'll be presenting the State Oil and Gas Board at some point in the future here with a draft set of rules and regulations which they can then act on. A lot of coordination is going on. We've already talked about the cooperative relationship we have with Ken and the Southern States Energy Board. That's very much appreciated. We're working with our sister state agencies to make sure that we're not double regulating, or that we all understand where we interface and how we complement each other with a regulatory framework rather than stepping on each other's toes out there in the field. The Department of Environmental Management, the Surface Mining Commission, the Department of Labor, others that have some role in overseeing either quarrying or mining or environmental regulation. So all of that's being done as a cooperative effort. Again, I mentioned our friends from the Canadian government and from the province of Alberta. Very important relationship that we have there, and we plan to continue that. Had some talks at this meeting with the Department of Energy about their interest in some of this and how we might work together to leverage some of our resources. So I'm not going to go into all the details here, but this is an outline of how the process of rulemaking goes with the State Oil and Gas Board. I'll just say it this way: it's a very open process. It's a very transparent process. It gives the public, anybody that's interested in this, ample opportunity to comment, to let the board know how they feel about things, and then for that to be considered before the board finally adopts a rule. It also goes through the administrative procedure process of the state of Alabama, so the legislature also has a shot at this at some point. So it's an arduous process that takes some time, but at the same time it's a very open process that makes sure that everybody has a voice as we move along in this rulemaking. We've been very much engaged with the public over the past few months. There's been a lot of publicity. Some of the newspapers in North Alabama have been publishing a series of articles on this. It's gotten some groups concerned, and rightfully so. People have a right to be concerned about things going on in their backyard. So the important thing that we've been trying to do is get factual information out there on the ground. There was a lot of misconceptions, a lot of non-factual information that was being disseminated, mainly because people didn't know. So we took it upon ourselves to go out and meet with the public and to do some other things, to talk to some of the media outlets up there, to try to get the facts on the ground about where we are, about what we know, what we don't know, what we intend to learn, and where we are in the process. We worked with the Alabama Extension Service down at Auburn, and a big group of people, all of these various groups over there, and a couple of others, to develop some fact sheets on this to get out to the public. And we actually distributed these at a big public meeting in Florence, Alabama, back in June. So we had about 200, 300 people in the audience. It was a big group, and we had a very nice meeting. We gave a series of presentations, again, on what we know, what we don't know, what we intend to learn, and where we're headed, where we are and where we're headed, kind of stuff. So I think that was very well received, and we appreciate being able to work with our other agencies and with the Extension Service. The Extension Service is a real resource that's out there because they have people in every courthouse in every county up there. So these are people that are trusted in the communities, that if we can talk to them and get the information to them, then they in turn can impart that information to the citizens. And so that's a very important process. So, kind of start wrapping up here. We're developing a comprehensive resource assessment that addresses industry and community questions and concerns and provides decision makers in the state of Alabama, our policy makers, with the information they need to move forward with this, to understand where we are, to inform their decisions. So we'll have a good technical and scientific background for what we do. Then to develop a comprehensive regulatory framework, again, through an open process with all of the stakeholders that allows us to develop this in a way that's economic, environmentally sound, and prudent for the state of Alabama, that also conserves the resource. So I'll summarize by saying we do have a very significant resource in North Alabama. We've got a lot of work to do to fully understand that resource. We've got work to do to develop a regulatory framework that can oversee this development as we move ahead. We're very excited to be involved in this and engaged in this. This is a geologist's dream to be given funding to go out and do a specific program with a specific group of rocks and really get a handle and understand it. So we're grateful to the governor and the legislature for what they've done. Grateful to Ken and SSEB for kind of brokering some partnerships and helping us with that. So with that, if I have time, I'll take a couple of questions. Thank you for listening today. I appreciate it.
My name is Bob Ruccio. I'm in the State Senate in North Carolina. Representative Mike Hager also. We co-authored the bill. And in line with what you're saying, we've been working on the project for about three and a half years. Passed legislation this past summer. The rules and regulations for shale gas exploration and development are state-of-the-art, something we can all be proud of, maybe a national model. But what it means is without another vote of the legislature, we will be able to issue permits next year at the time the legislature ends, and no later than June of 2015. And we will begin exploring shale gas for shale gas exploration. We don't use the F word in North Carolina. Of course, the media does, but the good news is that we're excited about what it offers. We've got a very favorable severance package along with this, so that we can inspire drillers and other folks to come in. We're doing some exploratory wells in addition to what we already have in place. And we expect to see a good bit of wet natural gas coming out of that shale gas, but again, in line with what Alabama and Mississippi are doing. We've worked on this for quite a while, and the rules and regulations are now going through rules review, but we expect no problems with that, and I'm very excited about what this will do for North Carolina and our part in the American effort for energy independence.
Good. I know you're a state geologist. My counterpart there, Ken Taylor, has worked a lot on that, and I've had several conversations with Ken about your evolving rulemaking process. So he's a good friend. Thank you, everyone. I really enjoyed it.